Good morning, everybody, and hopefully you can all hear me okay. This is Chris Booth talking from ITHealth. I'd like to welcome those of you that have joined us early. We're going to give it a few minutes before we start and let a few more people join. That's okay, everybody. We'll be back to you in a second. Thank you. Good morning again, Chris Booth here from ITHealth. I think we will make a start on time. I think other people will join over the next 5 or 10 minutes, but we'll make a start and we'll get on with the webinar. So this morning we're going to be talking about transforming IT services and delivery through automation, and hopefully that's going to be really interesting. I'm joined by a couple of colleagues from Osirium. Jenna, would you like to do a quick introduction?
Okay, thanks, Chris. Yeah, my name's Mark Warren. I'm Marketing Director at Osirium. I've been here around 3 years now with over 30 years experience in IT service delivery, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you about the Osirium solution later in the presentation.
My name's Wes Revel. I'm a sales engineer working with Mark, so I'll be doing the demo for you guys later on.
Thanks, gents. And by way of introduction again, Chris Booth, it says on the screen, the Healthcare Account Manager. I've been with ITHealth now for as long as I can remember. I've been in IT security and the likes for nearly 30 years now. So some good experience, hopefully, to share with you today. By way of housekeeping, I say I hope everybody can hear me okay. If you can't, please throw a hand up or throw a question in the box. We will have a questionnaire as you leave. If you can fill it in, that'd be really helpful. It just helps us with understanding how we better deliver these sessions, and it's just good to be able to share this information. So just a quick introduction about who we are. So ITHealth have been around for 30 years, actually our 30th birthday this year, and we spent all of that time working within the NHS, working with organisations and working to bring technology to bear to help improve what it is that you do on a day-to-day basis. And these are some of the areas that you're probably familiar with, those of you that work with us for some time, in terms of what we do on a day-to-day basis in supporting you. Our real emphasis is about relationship. It's about working with you to understand the challenges you face and trying to bring technologies to bear to help do that. And there's some of those on the screen, as you can see. Happy to talk to you about those at any point in time. And we're going to obviously talk a little bit about our ITHealth Assurance dashboard, which is in well over 100 organisations now. And we also have another product which we build ourselves called Secure IT. That's an MFA solution, remote access solution. And in both those cases, kind of built with you for you in terms of what that does on a kind of day-to-day, side-by-side basis. Today we're going to focus in on our partnership with Osirium. That's long-standing now. It's kind of 2-3 years in. We recognise that privileged access management and privileged process automation is something that has really been vogue. Coming out of NHSD around backups, around PAM and things like that, and third-party access. And we partnered with Osirium for good reason. Culturally good fit, UK-based company. UK-based support, very similar to ourselves, got a very strong track record, and had a PAM PAM track record. It kind of came from that point of view, and so we're going to move on to talk about privileged automation this morning. And what we want to do is share with you how we are connecting technology, how we are bringing our dashboard together with Osirium technology to improve the processes that go on the day-to-day basis. And say 130 dashboard customers now, that's growing across every type of organisation that we can expect to find. Many of you are obviously on this morning. And similarly, from our Osirium partnerships, we've got a growing number now. Again, that grows year by year. and kind of moves out of just the PAM scenario, whether it be third party or internal security, into this previous automation piece, which we're going to talk about now. We are going to focus in on one use case, and that is with one of the CSUs, where they face some challenges in terms of what they were doing, and we kind of said, hey, look, there's some technology out here that could help. Mark will talk more into that, as will Wes. But also, the dashboard is able to surface that information. It brings information to you in a way that's easy to understand. And could we take that information and then look to integrate that into an automation process that would help with your resource, help with how you facilitate that, and reduce that workload? And that's really what we want to talk into in more detail as we go through this morning. So I'm just going to hand over my keyboard and mouse to Mark, and hopefully you now have that, Mark. There you go.
Fantastic.
Great.
Thanks, Chris. And it's working even better. Yeah, hello and good morning again, everybody. So I'm with Osirium, as Chris mentioned. Our primary strength, and where we've been focusing for the last 14 years, I guess, since 2008, was around privileged access management. So that's about protecting access to shared IT devices and services. Over the last couple of years, we've extended that portfolio to include both endpoint protection and what we're going to be talking about today with automation. We've got customers across all industries, across all sizes, and in multiple continents now, with around 50 NHS trusts on board already. Many of those working with ITHealth, as Chris said, which has been a great relationship. What we're going to look at today is some of the technology that MLCSU have chosen and why they chose that, and what was the problem they were trying to solve. And it's a problem that's quite common for many organisations, in that, and the NHS has some special kind of nuances to that need, but they're quite common problems, really. And that's around managing user accounts, and particularly privileged accounts, and the operations that people can do with those privileged accounts. Now, in the DSP requirements, we'll look at this in a second, there are some quite specific requirements for active management of user accounts, particularly active management of privileged accounts. The ITHealth dashboard, which we'll see later, really helps to uncover those accounts and where they are, and what maintenance needs to be performed on those accounts, which is a great starting point. But all the changes required to deliver on keeping those accounts up to date and making sure the right people have access to the right systems at the right time, all those requests have to be filtered through help desks, often centralized IT help desks that are really busy. They've got plenty of big ticket items to be working on, and then to keep getting requests for resetting a user password or creating an account for a new user is seen as something that's perhaps not quite as valuable, and can often be delayed. Imagine if you've got a queue of people wanting to create accounts for new starters, but suddenly a server goes offline. Which one are you going to prioritize? You're going to prioritize getting the server back online. So those requests can have a lot of delay, and that can be really expensive, not just because it's not good practice, but also imagine if somebody leaves a hospital or a GP practice, the final working day is on Friday, but their accounts don't get closed down till Monday or even weeks later, and potentially those accounts are left open. That's really not a good state of affairs. Now, if we look at DSP, I've just highlighted a few of the particular requirements for specifically privileged user access. There are other requirements I could highlight here, but the important thing is that you have visibility into what accounts you have and into what people are doing with those accounts, and that you are making those updates in a timely manner. And I say, if that all has to be routed through a busy help desk, then there will be delays, and we won't, there is potential risk for attack. There has to be a better way. Ideally, those seemingly simple operations like reset password or whatever, you'd ideally want to try and delegate those out to perhaps the first line help desk engineers, or even better, out to users to let them do the work for themselves. And that's the situation that's coming up at MLCSU. We'll see that a little bit later. But they aren't being delegated, and why might that be? A lot of organizations have problems with delegation, move on to the next slide. There we are. You know, they'd like to be able to delegate more to shift left those IT tasks so that end users can get faster response. Indeed, they're really looking for immediate response, and let those IT admins focus on high-level tasks. But most organizations can't do that at the moment. Now, why might that be? Well, we did some research last year. We commissioned some independent research, which went out and surveyed over 1,000 IT leaders across a wide variety of industries, and asked why aren't you delegating more IT work? Now, sure enough, about a third of respondents said, well, you know, this is my job to actually do this work, so why would I want to give it to somebody else? But the highest risks that were highlighted were really about, so the highest reason for not delegating was about risk, and we dived into that in a little bit more detail. And people were talking about security risk. Can you trust the help desk engineer to do the work safely and securely and not do something they shouldn't? You know, if they can get into reset a user password, perhaps they can get in and change permissions on the account. Perhaps they could create new users, and they really shouldn't be able to do that. Compliance risk was another one. Can I show that I'm complying with standards like DSP if I've let somebody else do those kind of work for me? And then performance risk. If I let the help desk take care of this job, could they do it as fast as I can do it, or am I slowing things down? So a number of elements to the risk equation there, which is holding people back from delegating more of that kind of IT work. Well, the answer to being able to delegate safely is about automating those tasks. Automation means that you are enforcing the processes that have been reviewed and been approved to make sure that you are in compliance, to make sure that changes are being done, and making sure that only the changes that are required and approved are being executed. The person making those changes can't do anything they shouldn't. Automation, if it's done right, ensures that the credentials used to connect to those back-end systems, whether that's a clinical system, or it's Office 365, or it's Active Directory, or any other number of systems and devices, the credentials you need to log in, the usernames and passwords, etc., they need to be kept secure and should never be exposed out to that help desk engineer or to that end user, so that they could perhaps save them for later or be intercepted by some malware or by an attacker that manages to get into a user account. So credentials have to be, credential security ought to be at the heart of anything you do when looking at automation. And finally, if you've got an end-to-end audit trail across the entire process, and remember, these processes might update multiple systems in one go. If you're creating accounts for a new joiner, you might create an Office 365 account and an Active Directory account and a Workday account and an account on a clinical system somewhere. So if you're trying to find an audit trail to show those changes across all of those different systems, how many places do you need to go and look? If you've got a single view across that audit trail, then you can be confident you can always go back and check what has been happening, especially if you come around to DSPT time and you need to show evidence for what you've been doing. You can get that audit trail in one place. So automation really ticks a lot of those boxes and addresses those risk concerns. And that's where Osirium Automation comes in. And this is an automation solution that we launched a couple of years ago now. And at its heart is that security element, because that's our background. That's what we, our kind of core skills are about protecting credentials and protecting how people use them to get their work done. And that's how we built the automation solution around it. Now, I've spoken a lot here. We've seen a lot of slides already, and I've talked about this in the kind of abstract, but it's probably better if you actually see automation in operation. So at this point, I'm going to hand over to Wes, and he can show you what I'm talking about by automating or delegating those IT tasks. So, Chris, if you can make Wes the presenter now, please.
Yep, certainly. Yeah, Wes, all yours.
Okay, give me a quick second. Right, is that coming through okay?
Yeah, looks good. Thanks, Wes.
All right, okay. So, yeah, as Mark mentioned, we have a variety of tasks that we can now begin to delegate out to the help desk or to whichever users would need access to be able to complete these types of tasks. Now, we're primarily going to focus on the AD side of things today, but as you can see here, we can go through the basics of if I scroll down, the most kind of basic troubleshooting tasks. So the first one we'll go through is to be able to unlock a user. We'll find the task that we're looking for, click on the Start button, and it will load us up with a nice user interface. Now, this can be completely customized to every organization, so whatever text is in here, you can change it to suit whatever you want to say to the actual help desk users. But by default, they'll include the basics of what the task is going to achieve and what the user is going to need to complete that task. If we click on Start, it goes through a very simple process of being able to search for the user. So we'll just type in his first name there. It will then go off to AD and pull the relevant users down. If that's the one that we're looking for, we can select yes. And at this point, it will have also checked if it was a locked account. If he was locked, then it would unlock it here. And either way, it will come back with the task succeeded once the task is completed. Now, the next one on from that is if you've got a user that's locked himself out, they've probably forgotten their password. So the help desk would need to be able to reset the password. So you've got a password reset option here. Very similar process to the other one. Again, it goes through the user interface. And with the automation tool, you can also very simply combine tasks. So if you wanted these two tasks together as one task, it's easy to do. Again, same sort of process. We'll go through it, find the user that we want. And in this case, it's going to ask me for those new credentials and let me know how strong it is as well. Now, with this one, it's not built into the task by default, but you can very simply add options for it to be able to do things like an approval process, or for the passwords in particular, you could actually set it up that it would email the user their new credentials to be able to log in. Okay. Now, for the more kind of regular tasks that you've got, we've also got this review group memberships. So this could be made available to all the different people that are managing groups within AD, whether that's just from management side or in the IT team itself. With this, any groups that you are a member of, it will automatically search AD to find them. So you can see here, it's going to be certifying the users, but it will go through AD, find all the groups that you are managing, bring them back for you, and you can select the groups individually or select them all in one go. And at this point, it's going to ask which users it's going to bring back a list of the users that are in there and ask you which users you want to remain in there. If you're happy with all the users, you can just tick this. But if you say, for instance, didn't want that one in there, you can untick whichever ones they are. And at that point, it will then make the necessary changes to remove the user from the group. And at the end of it, we can supply an email address for the email to go to once it's all completed. If I can type. And my email is not working, but that's by the by. Okay, now these are all AD groups, AD tasks, and they're all built into the solution by default. You can either have them kicked off by users, or because we have very much an API-driven system, you can also have any of these tasks started by an API. So for example, if you had a ticketing system in place, and rather than users having to come in here, you could actually kick these tasks off through the ticketing system. Now, as I mentioned, you can combine tasks, and this joiner process is an example of that. So with this, if we go through this one, this is something that you could get one of your HR people to do, but for example, and they wouldn't need to know anything about AD or anything about all the different systems that they're having to create accounts on. All that it does is takes them through that same interface, which can be completely customized, and it will get to a point where they can start typing in the first name, the surname, and at this point, if we select a department, the system task will know which groups it's got to be a member of in AD, and also which applications it needs to be signed up to. We can also select a line manager here, and we can add in options like whether a VPN is required or those kind of things. Once it gets to this point, it will verify that you're happy with everything you put in, At this point as well, you could actually add in an approval process if you wanted to. So rather than it just going off, it would go to like an IT person just to make sure that it's all correct. And once everything's gone through, you'll see there it connects to all the different accounts, different systems, creates the account. It does take a little bit of time to go through. Okay, so once it's completed, it will give you the report of exactly what it's done and all the information that you've entered. As you can see here, this information at the end of it will be emailed to the joiner's line manager. And as a last step on this, it sends off all the welcome emails and then changes all the passwords so that on first login, they're required to be changed. Okay. So that's the main way we can interact with the tasks. Any task that is done, whether it's done through a user or through a API, you will be able to find within the activity side. So if we click on Finish Tasks, you can see here all the different tasks that have been done. The nice thing with this as well is that you can attach to them. And when you're attached to them, you get a full view of exactly what's been done in that task as well. Okay. So that's kind of the basics of the demo side of things. So I'll hand back over to Mark. I can change
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Wes.
No problem.
Chris, if you can pick up presenter again. Excellent, thank you.
There you go, Mark.
Okay, thanks. Have I got the keyboard still?
Yes, you should have.
Not. You might have to give it again.
Okay, 1 second. Yeah, I think she's still got it. Can you try again, or I'll move them for you?
Okay, let's. Yeah, if you can move on. It's not doing anything right now. Yeah, again, if you go into a couple of slides, actually, let's skip over the next one.
There you go.
So, great demo by Wes there that showed a broad range of tasks, and that's exactly what MLCSU identified as a need across their region. And they're particularly looking at primary care, which is unusual because a lot of our NHS clients are in acute care. And it's not to say that what we've seen here doesn't apply there as well, but the particular circumstance they had is, you know, all of the CCGs in their region have many, you know, as you can imagine, hundreds of GP practices that need to be supported with little or no local IT coverage. So what they've been able to do is to delegate out to the GP practice the possibility of doing those simple account management tasks like creating a user, disabling a user, resetting a password, etc. So they can do that immediately, and they don't have to submit a request to the centralized help desk and wait for one or more admins to be available to actually make the change that they've requested, which could take, let's say, days or hours, days, or even weeks if, you know, other priority items keep getting in the way. And they've been so excited about how productive that's made them, and they really like having that control over their own kind of environment. And you know, they are desperate to keep using that. And MLCSU are kind of, or working particularly with the Birmingham Solihull CCG, they're rolling that out across their domain very quickly because you know, every practice really is looking for that kind of self-service activity. So we'll be publishing a case study with those guys very soon. It goes into a little bit more detail there, but what was really thrilling for us was, and I spoke to one of those end users last week, and he was saying, and he's not the technical expert, he's not an AD administrator, whatever, but the productivity that he's gained, and also the kind of soft benefits of I can get stuff done when I need to get it done, has been really energizing for them. You know, so when we say, and when MLCSU talk about transforming IT service, it really is a transformative change for the way that GP practices are being managed. Next slide, please. So, great story. We've seen the dashboard. We've seen that Wes had a very highly populated dashboard there with lots of tasks on there. Those tasks will actually be controlled by the role of the person logging into automation, into PPA. So you can control who has access to which tasks. So you know, some people may only have one task, some may only have 2 or 3. That's absolutely fine. We've talked about the way that those tasks are presented, so they're very easy for non-technical people to drive, because they're very conversational, very guided process. You can't do anything. You can't, you know, the user can't do anything they shouldn't be able to do. Everything is enforced, and there's always that audit trail going in the background as well. Next slide, please. And a little bit kind of under the covers of how that works. It's a very open architecture that integrates, as Wes says, through APIs. So it could integrate to your existing help desk tool if you're using Topdesk or ServiceNow or whatever, or to a corporate, you know, to kind of your local intranet portal, that kind of thing. So you can have the same workflow for how people raise tickets, and whether it gets delegated to an engineer to go and, you know, physically do a change, like plug a printer into the wall or whatever, or to an automated task that goes and resets a password. That's all fine on the back end. We use secure password vaults under the covers. It could be HashiCorp, it could be Osirium PAM, or it could be another PAM or another vault. You know, it's completely open in the architecture. You don't need to have Osirium PAM to make any of this work. Or you can integrate with many back-end systems, so whether it's Office 365 or Active Directory or AWS, and you can communicate for approvals through email or through Slack or through Teams. So lots of openness there. And we have a resource hub online which has pre-built automated playbooks for those common tasks, the things we've seen today. There's about, I can't remember, there's heading towards 30, I think, tasks around Active Directory, but there's also tasks for AWS and Azure and many other systems as well. They're all available for download free from the PPA Resource Hub, and we keep building that out and expanding it over time. So it's really got everything you need to securely and safely delegate your IT operations out to your help desk engineers or out into end user land. And I think that's me done. I'll hand it back to you, Chris. Yeah, just wrapping up. If you want to get more information, go to osirium.com/automation. I don't know if we'll take some questions now, or we'll hold them to the end.
Yeah, there's no questions come through in terms of that.
Let's hold them to the end.
We can take that at the end. So that's absolutely fine. I'll skip that one. So what we've seen so far is that there's a capability to automate a whole raft of tasks. We've kind of focused on an AD because they seem to be the ones that cause problems, and they are, it's quite popular, and there's lots of playbooks, but obviously as has already been said, there's a whole plethora. What we're looking at today, and these two aren't exclusively mutual, is how we bring our IT health assurance dashboard together with the automation process. And in that regard, just a bit of a recap. Those of you that have got the dashboard who are familiar with these kind of features that are in the dashboard right now, many more coming. Those of you that don't have the dashboard, you've probably spoken to us about it, and you will be aware, and this may be a bit of an update, but we are talking about the dashboard surfacing out information that already exists on your network, in your devices, and other appliances maybe, whether that be, computer technology, whether it be network infrastructure, etc., etc. And then we bring that out in a way whereby we then contrast and compare that with vulnerabilities, whether they be NHS cyber alerts, whether they be care certs by one of the name, whether it be CVEs, whether it be CISA information, whether it be vulnerabilities, etc., etc., or compliance information around things like ATP. And of course, as part of that, the dashboard is most likely surfacing out information about devices and users. And this is where we kind of started to have this conversation. So this is a fairly typical view. Again, if you're not familiar with this, happy to talk to you about it beyond this call. Those of you that have got it will be familiar with kind of Windows Assurance tab that we talk about here. And this is showing a whole raft of information around the Windows estate. over here in the bottom right hand corner, you can see my mouse. So we've got information about users not seen, computers not seen, things like failed gone. This information has been derived from connectivity with Active Directory. Now, clearly, understanding the environment and understanding which users in this case have not been seen for 60, 90 days is one of those things that may or may not be present to you. You may or may not have alerts set against things like that. You may or may not know about them. But clearly from here, we can click through into that list of devices, all those people, and that's a long list there. So I'm not going to use that example. I'll just use a more simplified, this actually devices, but the same logic applies. I can click through to find a list of people or devices. Now, what we're looking at already with Midlands and Lancs as a project and others where I've spoken to as part of our dashboard service reviews is the capability to say, how do we now get this information, that user information, directly into an automation process? You've already heard that automation can be done by kicking off an API. At the moment, we're doing it manually, so it would be copy paste. We've now got the names, drop those into an automation process that is said to say, right, you've gone beyond 60 days, please disable those accounts and confirm that's been done. That kind of logic is what we're looking at. And again, we wanted to kind of just bring this into play to say, well, we've got all of this information in the dashboard, or you have got this information in your dashboard, and therefore by a process of elimination, it's fairly straightforward to grab this information and then push it out. The next step, which you've already spoken to Osirium about, within that kind of use case that we've talked about around Midlands and Lancs, is to how we then automate that as an API and push that out as a process, which runs as a task on a regular basis with all that authentication and approval process, and it does the jobs it needs to do. Now, if you extend the logic into what else is in the dashboard, whether it be care certs, could we automate a care cert process? Could we automate a vulnerability process, an end-of-life software process? All of that is all ultimately achievable, and that's what we're kind of looking at now, which is why we kind of wanted to tie the two together in this context. But again, they're not mutually connected in that way. As Mark's already said, other technology can feed this if you've already got that in there and you want to kind of look at this this technology going forward. So I mentioned care certs and how we might take that information from here, push that out to automatically remediate certain devices if that remediation process is approved locally. You kind of hopefully building a picture. And again, here's the AD piece in here. We've also got other information down here around things like shares or domain admins and things like that, which of course the PAM piece plays into. So hopefully that's kind of showing you how we're going to move that forward in terms of that integration piece. But it's already happening now, just it's a manual task that is kicked off by an individual. So I'm going to kind of close with that. If you've heard things today that are kind of interest, then get back in touch with us. There's an opportunity as you leave to kind of just ask us to get back in contact with you. Obviously, those of you that have already got Osirium PAM, you have an element of kind of trial capability with PPA that's in there, which we could set up POCs going on from there. If you haven't got the dashboard and you're interested, a bit of a plug here, apologies, but 9th of June, we've got another webinar, which Craig Robinson is doing from County Durham. We're going to talk more into things like how we supported them with Log4j and things like that in those very, very particular use cases. I think we have a couple of questions that have come in, so let's have a quick look. So Mark, Wes, does the automation work with NHS Mail and the national tenancy, which is always a good question. How have those 365s been applied with the acceptable use policy? So it's quite a big question. So the first one, I suppose, is working with the national tenancy. Is that happening with Midlands and Lancs?
They're going through a process at the moment where they're evaluating whether they're going to be offering an on-premise hosted by MLCSU or by going to a cloud-hosted solution. That trial was running for the last week or so, and they were looking at the whole kind of life cycle and life cycle costs of doing both. I think that their initial deployments will probably be hosted by MLCSU, so I'm not entirely sure of the details of that. We could probably find out some more. But they were considering the options there, and PPA or automation is very flexible, whichever way you want to go with that. Whether you want to put that into an Azure environment or into something running in VMware or Hyper-V, whichever way you want to go.
And
I think that's probably. Go on.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so in terms of the actual integration with the different systems, provided that it's a something that can support a scripting language. Generally, even if we don't have an existing playbook for that type of technology, as long as it supports the scripting sort of processes behind it, it's fairly simple to build those templates quite quickly.
The national tenancy is an ongoing conversation that's happening a lot around, 365, mail, ATP, and I think it's kind of one that's a bit of a moving feast. So maybe we'll come back and answer that one directly as well with an email to the person who's raised the question. So that's the only question we've had so far. I say, obviously, as the delegates leave, they can ask them more questions or they can get back. We will be sending out to those. We will be sending out emails to follow up, and there will be recording in there. And I know some people have asked for the recording that couldn't make it today through various reasons. So we'll follow that up straight away afterwards with emails to give that detail. No more questions coming while I've been rambling on. So I'd just like to say thank you to everybody for attending and staying with us. Thanks to my colleagues, Mark and Wes, for their presentation. And again, if anybody wants any information beyond this, then just get back in touch with us, and we'll facilitate that via a more direct call. But thank you, everybody. Again, have a good day, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everybody. Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.